The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and thanks for joining today's webinar looking at how businesses can achieve visibility and compliance across multiple public clouds with Checkpoint Dome9. My name is Shona Bradshaw. I'm delighted to be joined today by Chris Beckett, one of the cloud specialists over at Checkpoint, who'll be taking you through the bulk of today's demonstrations and presentations. So a little bit of agenda for today's webinar. I'll start off with a bit of housekeeping and a very short introduction to Bytes. Many of you know us already, so I will keep that exceptionally brief before introducing Chris, our presenter today. Chris will be touching upon why organisations are looking at securing diverse cloud environments and some of the challenges therein, before giving a comprehensive demonstration of CloudGuard Dome9, which is a cloud compliance and visibility solution, and also tapping into a little bit of a first glance preview at CloudGuard Logic, which is designed to provide advanced security analytics for public cloud environments. We'll then have a Q&A at the end. So a little bit of housekeeping for today's session. Attendee lines are on mute throughout today's presentation. However, we welcome questions throughout and indeed at the end, so please do post those as they occur to you throughout Chris's presentation via the chat or the questions box, and I'll pose them all to Chris at the end of today's session. We will keep discussions today to strategy and solutions and technical aspects. We won't get into in-depth on any commercials on the session. However, those conversations are more than welcome via your Bytes account manager at the end of the webinar. We are recording today's session. We'll make that recording, both of the demonstration and the slides, available to your teams and yourself. And lastly, a quick request from me. We do have a feedback survey at the end, a very short 5-question survey, just to make sure that these sessions are hitting the mark for you content-wise. If you could take 2 seconds at the end of the webinar to complete that, that would be much appreciated. So, who are Bytes Security Partnerships? We are the security specialist reseller within the Bytes Technology Group in the UK. We were bought by Bytes around about 8 years ago now, and what we aim to do is to marry up the specialism and the agility and insight, the very personal approach that you would expect from the smallest specialist network reseller, with the global resources, scale and stability that comes from being part of a large multinational group. We're exceptionally proud at Bytes Security Partnerships of the technical expertise that we wrap around many of our different technologies, and in particular Checkpoint solutions. We've been a 4-star elite partner for Checkpoint for several years now, and we offer both a variety of different consultancy services around Checkpoint, managed services around Checkpoint, and also 24/7 direct-to-engineer support as well. So we really are one of the UK's leading Checkpoint partners and aiming to add a lot of value around their solution stack. We do work across the full spectrum of information security, from the next generation firewall, network security background which we came from, through to cloud security, security intelligence, data security, mobile security. Across the whole stack of information security technologies is where we can advise and add value. Across all of these, what we offer as Bytes is that technical expertise and essentially the extension of your IT support team that can help you, whether you're looking for installations, project planning, scoping, maintenance, whether you're looking at mapping out security strategy development, looking at market analysis and where you need to be focusing on next from a security standpoint, or day-to-day support in terms of making sure security technologies work as intended. So we have, as I said, in-house direct-to-escalation engineer support, a business hours at 24/7, with Checkpoint, ForcePoint and various other partners, which we're exceptionally proud of should you need us in your corner. So that's more than enough about us. What are we speaking to people about in the cloud space at the moment? So with public clouds, it's widely accepted that generally businesses are not necessarily putting all their eggs in one public cloud basket. They maybe have some of their infrastructure on Amazon Web Services, they're using Azure, they may be using Office 365, very different platforms, very different public clouds that they might be using as well as on-premise. And this means that there's a real need at the moment to be able to configure, manage and comply across the same security policy across very different cloud platforms and resources. At the same time, there is an increasing level of attacks happening, specifically in cloud environments. Businesses are talking to us at the moment about how they achieve protection from privileged user attacks, which data breaches are actually affecting public cloud platforms, and how they protect their account users from compromised data and hijacking. Now, Chris will be touching upon a lot of these in his presentation. He'll be taking you through how Dome9 and Logic can help you with that. So all that remains for me to do in this session is to introduce Chris. He's a cloud security specialist at Checkpoint. We've been working, as I said, with Checkpoint for various years as a top-tier partner. They come with a myriad of accolades across next-generation firewalls, etc., and secure millions of users around the globe in advancing and protecting their on-premise and cloud journeys. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chris, who will get deep into some technical demonstrations and some use cases around securing public cloud. Over to Chris.
Thanks, Shona. So I'll just show my screen. Is that okay? Can we see that okay?
That's absolutely fine. You are audible and visible. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to this session on securing your cloud with Dome9. I'm Chris Beckett from Checkpoint, as Shona mentioned. Just coming up on my 1-year anniversary with Checkpoint, so if you want to send me a cake, feel free. It's been an interesting year, and we've seen lots of different changes in the cloud. It's a very fast-moving environment. It's a very vast landscape. So the agenda today will be taking you through our CloudGuard suite, which is currently a suite of 3 products, which work very much kind of in lockstep, very complementary, just to give you a full view of what we do. But then obviously this session is primarily about Dome9, so we're going to drill down into Dome9. We've got about half an hour's worth of demo, something like that. So obviously we can't get too into the weeds in that sort of time frame, but hopefully we'll give you a good flavour of the sorts of things that you can achieve and the sorts of business problems hopefully you can address. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A if anything crops up that any burning questions that you've got. Obviously, feel free to pop them into the Q&A, and we'll try and answer those as best we can. So just to give you a quick overview of the CloudGuard suite, if you're not familiar with it, currently it's made up of 3 different products. If you start looking from the left-hand side here, we've got CloudGuard SaaS. This is in itself a SaaS-based solution, so it's API-based. It's not agent-based or require any infrastructure or anything like that. Very straightforward, quick setup that connects into these end user facing tools, the likes of Office 365 and G Suite and Salesforce and you know, some of these tools we inflict on end users. We can manage through CloudGuard SaaS. And it's a relatively new product. It was GA'd late last year. So obviously the functionality in that is not equivalent to what you get with CloudGuard IaaS, for example. But these modules are being built on all the time. Additional application support is built on all the time. And obviously with it being a SaaS service, as soon as a new update or feature is ready, it's just pushed straight to the platform for you to use. You don't have to go around patching things or sending out new agents or anything like that. That also works on a subscription model as well, which you'd kind of expect with a SaaS-based product. On the right-hand side is CloudGuard IaaS, which some of you may already be familiar with. This is our traditional firewall product, I guess, next-generation firewall product that runs in the cloud. And you can see, obviously, around the right-hand edge here, there's a whole slew of functionality that we've got built into this product. This is the firewall product that we've been doing for kind of 25 years. It's very mature technology. It's extremely stable. Obviously, you saw the list of awards and things that it's won, and the NSS Labs validation that we've got, we're very proud of. But the thing is, it's all right kind of taking the code off the physical firewall and putting it in a VM and sticking it into the cloud, but that's not really natively cloud. So what we do, we also provide some cloud native services on top of CloudGuard IaaS, that provide things like auto scaling, auto provisioning, high availability clustering in the cloud, where you can split across availability zones and things like that, just to make it more cloud native. And we try to make it as zero touch as possible. So there's a lot of infrastructure as code, a lot of ARM templates for Azure, CloudFormation templates for AWS, for example, that can do a huge amount of the heavy lifting for you. Just to finish on CloudGuard IaaS, one of the main strengths of this product is we can manage all of these platforms from a single management point. So all these public cloud platforms you see at the top, AWS and Google Cloud and Azure and all these other ones, as well as on-prem technologies such as OpenStack, and vCenter and NSX and ACI and Nuage. So extremely powerful technology. The final item in the CloudGuard suite is CloudGuard Dome9. This is a product, again, that we that came into Checkpoint late last year. Dome9 were a startup from Israel that we acquired, that was started by a couple of guys that are ex-Checkpoint. That have now come back to Checkpoint, considerably richer than when they left, I assume. But what CloudGuard Dome9 does, it's very complementary to the other two technologies. It has some similarities to CloudGuard SaaS in the sense that it's kind of a subscription-based SaaS product that you consume. It's all API based. You don't deploy agents or any sort of infrastructure to get it to work. You can literally be up and running in a few minutes. It's very, very straightforward. It provides support across the three main public cloud providers, Azure, GCP, and AWS. So kind of 99% of the cloud projects that we see are across these platforms. Within Dome9, there are multiple different modules and pieces of functionality. Again, this is kind of growing all the time. We're very reactive to customer requirements and customer needs. So, you know, this is very much a moving target, and much like CloudGuard SaaS, you know, you can log in one day and a new feature or a new function's already been pushed into there for you to consume. So really good from that standpoint. But Dome9 focuses primarily on these areas. So IAM safety, so the privilege escalation within AWS. If you need to give time-boxed access to someone to perform a particular task that could be destructive, you can do that within IAM safety. Compliance and governance, which is a major feature of Dome9, which will allow you to run both out-of-the-box checks, things like PCI-DSS, ISO27001, NIST, CIS benchmarks, all those sorts of things. You can run those manually. You can also run continuous compliance, which means that once every hour, Dome9 will log into your connected cloud environments, run these checks, and then send a report based on that, and obviously raise alerts as well. This supports all the different platforms. You can also write your own governance rules if you want to, and we'll show you how to do that in the demo. A new module that was released about 2 weeks ago is Logic, which Shona mentioned. Logic is a module that consumes log files from cloud services, brings them into a central point, and basically gives you the ability to very quickly get a view on what's going on in your cloud environment. So as well as drilling into flow logs and CloudTrail logs, you've also got the ability again to do this continuous compliance. So when anomalies are kind of flagged up within these log files, you can perform actions based on that. Inventory allows you to see all of your cloud assets across all of these three cloud platforms in a single place. Gives you the ability to filter out, run reports and things like that, which we'll look at in the demo. API driven, not only do we consume APIs, but we provide an API. So if you're doing a lot of programmatic work in the cloud, if you're using continuous integration, continuous deployment, lots of scripting and automation, there is an API for Dome9 that you can use as well. We also have auto remediation features. So within AWS, we've got this framework called CloudBots, which is essentially a bunch of Lambda functions, which will let you perform tasks on a given security finding. So for example, if an EC2 instance is provisioned in Brazil and that's not a standard area for you, your compliance check can auto terminate that instance. I'm also pleased to announce that we've just provided full support for Microsoft Azure as well. So we'll be bringing a lot more functionality onto that platform as we go. And then finally, the last module within Dome9 is network security. What this will do is allow you to manage and view your security group sort of environment, looking at what the settings are, graphically what that looks like in reality, but also the ability to create and amend and delete security groups from a single point across multiple different platforms. So the boring slide was out the way, which is the good news. So we'll take you straight into the demos now. So this is the Dome9 landing page. So like I said, it's just a cloud-based service. You log in, and in this environment, you see all these different interconnected accounts that we've got. We've got a couple of AWS and Azure and GCP, account up of our assets, our security groups that we've got, and a few other statistics in here as well that are all hyperlinked and you can drill into and have a look. You know, fairly standard stuff really. Now, within these cloud accounts are protected assets. So this could be anything. This could be virtual machines, load balancers, Lambda functions, security groups, whatever. But the whole point of Dome9, as I say, is you've got all of these things connected in, but you can very quickly, with these built-in filters, and you'll see a lot of these screens have got this built-in filter viewer on the left-hand side. You can very quickly push the stuff to the background that you don't care about and bring the stuff that you do care about into the foreground, and you can look at it. So for example, we've got some organizational unit support in here. So you can assign a cloud account to a particular department or business unit or project, however you've got that laid out in the cloud. You could have a combination of all three if you wanted to. But you can filter out and say, right, I'm only interested in business unit 1 or project Omega or whatever. You can also filter out by different cloud providers. So I could filter out and just look at the Azure stuff in here. So very quickly, I'm pushing out the AWS stuff. I'm pushing out GCP. I'm not interested in that. I want to go look at this. If I clear the filter out, I can also filter by region, by different cloud account, resource group, etc. You sort of get the idea. But the point of this is that Azure's quite good at showing you a global view of what your cloud environment looks like, but AWS is very sort of region focused. So even in one AWS account, you could have provisioned some EC2 instances and then logged off and logged back in again, and they've gone, and you think, well, what's gone on here? But actually, on the top right hand side, you might have selected a different region, for example. So what we do is we can bring all of that thing into one view. We can also bring in multiple different accounts, multiple different subscriptions, multiple different projects, all into this single view, where then it's very easy to start filtering out and being able to explore everything that's within these particular cloud environments. Because ultimately, as I said at the start, the cloud world is a very vast landscape. We can't possibly be aware of everything that's happening at any given moment. We also can't possibly be aware of any small doors or windows that might be open. So ultimately, we need some help in getting there and having a really good security baseline. In terms of actually onboarding accounts into this environment, we run in 2 modes. We run in read-only mode and read-write mode. They're pretty much what they say they are. So monitor mode, you can do a good chunk of what Dome9 can do in read-only mode. One great thing about this is that if you're looking at a proof of concept, you can use read-only mode and point it at your production environment, so that when you run a PLC, all the information that you get back into Dome9 is actually real actionable data. It's not, if you pointed at an Azure subscription or an AWS account or a GCP project with a couple of VMs in it, a load balancer, maybe a storage bucket, it's not really going to tell you all that much. But read-only, it can't do any damage, it can't make any changes. It's literally looking at your environment with a magnifying glass. What's going on in here? What does the network security baseline look like? Can I run compliance against it? What's missing? Alerts and policy reports. We also run in read-write mode. Read-write mode essentially allows you all of the previous functionality that you can do with read-only mode, but also lets you do things like have a single point of management for network security groups, and also do the identity and access management safety as well. So it's just really because we need to make a couple of changes in the cloud environment, so we need read-write access. But very, very straightforward. You can click on this, and it's a few-step wizard. If you're running in AWS, for example, we'll give you the policy document that to copy and paste into AWS that we use. And if you look at this, it's easily auditable from a SOC point of view. So you look at the permissions that we're asking for, they're all kind of list and describe and get. We're not making any changes within that particular environment. So you can feel comfortable that if you run a PLC in read-only mode and point it into the production world, you're going to be okay with that. But it's literally kind of a next type thing. So give it a display name, external IDs, etc. Or if you come into Azure, for example, much the same thing. It's the same as connecting anything else up to Azure, pretty much. So an application ID, a secret key, Azure AD, tenant ID, a secret key to get into that. So it's really, really quick, a few clicks and you're up and running. If you've got a number of accounts and subscriptions and projects that you want to onboard at once, we do also have scripted onboarding as well. So you can run that against the different connected accounts you've got and bring those on rather than having to go through this interface for, you know, a few dozen accounts and subscriptions. So the next main part of Dome9 is compliance and governance, and this is where we see a huge amount of traction in the market for Dome9. It's, if you look at the likes of Azure Security Center and AWS's, I can't think what it's called now, Security Hub, they're now starting to move into this territory of giving you these checks. Now, the big differentiator for us as Dome9 is that, for example, Azure Security Center will give you, I think, CIS benchmarks, which is great, except you can't create your own, you can't amend what's in that, and there's literally just CIS, there's no PCI-DSS, there's no ISO27001. So there's a difference between what we can do with Dome9 and what's natively provided on that platform. Obviously, over time, that's going to grow from the platform provider's point of view, but also from Dome9, we're already ahead of that, and we're going to keep pressing ahead with that. So the rule sets that we've got within here, again, it's the same idea with the filtering. We can filter it by platform, by type, by category, etc. And the thing to draw your attention to here is that we've got two different types of compliance rule sets. We've got the Dome9 managed and we've got the customer managed. And essentially what they are is the Dome9 managed are the pre-built rule sets that you get out of the box when you sign into Dome9. There are something like 1,600 pre-built rules for you to use. These Dome9 managed rule sets are read-only. So these are built along the lines of typical compliance checks. And again, you know, we can kind of filter out by different platform, etc. And you see the sorts of things that we've got. But it isn't just about the likes of HIPAA, which is not always relevant in the UK. We got, like I said, we've got CIS foundations, we've got some Dome9 best practices, we've got some network alerts, but we also try and, if the cloud provider has got a white paper around best practices of their particular platform, we'll build a rule set around that so you can not only look at things from a legal standpoint, but also from a best practices standpoint. These managed policies are read-only, but what you can do is you can clone them and basically fork them. So you can take a copy of this to get started, you can amend rules, you can add some, you can delete some, you know, tinker with them as you see fit. But it's actually really straightforward. So it's just a point and shoot type assessment. Choose which cloud account you want. You can run it against all of them or just an individual one. You can break it down by region, and you can also break it down by VNet. But if I click on run, when this assessment runs, this is going to go away and run these 51 checks, sorry, not 51 checks, 289 checks that we've got built into this rule set, and it's like, you know, 10 seconds at the most. What you get from this is this breakdown report of everything that's happening according to that rule set. So you get a baseline score, so nearly 97%, actually pretty good, but you know, there's still room for improvement. All of these checks have got a RAG status, so red, amber, and green. Which particular objects within that cloud environment we've checked. So we're not just focused on virtual machines, but we're also looking at things like container registries, Cosmos DB, SQL, application gateways, a whole raft of things. Again, the filter view you get here on the left, so you can filter out by different objects, by different compliance sections, by severity, passed or failed. You sort of get the idea. There are a few cloud services that are worldwide, so things like AWS Identity and Access Management is a worldwide service. So what you can do is you can look on here and see, you know, if I've got a service deployed and I've got something that's failed a check that's in the US, for example, I might wonder why actually, you know, is this service in the US and is it something that I need to be concerned about? But that's another map you can drill in and look at and sort of look at things from that perspective. If I expand one of these checks, you see that within this check, we've got an actual, the name of the check itself, so ensure that public access is set to private for blob containers. So, you know, that one of the most obvious attack vectors, but still very widely used, is public access into storage accounts in cloud provider environments. So I know it's the kind of topic that's been done to death, but it's still amazing, you know, how many times organizations get their pants pulled down because of this. So this particular check that we've got here, we've tested 40 objects, 40 are within the scope of that check, and 38 are non-compliant. So we've obviously got quite a big issue here. But all of these checks have got a description. So, you know, what does this check do? Steps for remediation. So this is how to fix it. What the default value should be. So this is set to private for blob containers. And then what we try and do is give you a reference off to like a third party. So if it's the likes of PCI-DSS or the cloud providers documentation themselves, we try and give you a steer on why this is a best practice. And the way that we design these queries is around a query language within Dome9 called GSL. That stands for Governance Specification Language, and it's really just a way to give you a very natural language-based query language that you can use to extract information from cloud platforms. And these GSL queries essentially sit in front of a back-end API call into that cloud provider's environment, which, you know, can get really complex. But the whole point of GSL is it's really simple to get going. Even if you'd never seen GSL before, you could have a look at that GSL rule and still have a pretty good idea of kind of what's going on. So in terms of actually writing your own, it's really simple. You come into the playground. We've got a free text editor or a rule builder. If you use the free text editor and you start to type, it will look up all of the cloud objects that we currently support. So you can write it that way if you want to, or you can come into the rule builder, which is a bit more of a drag and drop type environment. So you can very quickly start composing rules and check them in this playground to see that your syntax is correct, you get the results you expect, etc. So looking at this, if we do a really quick query, if we say virtual machine should have region equals North Europe. And what this check does is to say, all of my stuff should be in Dublin. If it's not, tell me which ones aren't. So if I look at these, you can see I shouldn't have anything in here that's listed as Ireland. It's all pretty much US based. Got a UK West in here as well. So it's quite common for organizations to nominate a primary region to put their VMs and resources into. And this is one good quick way of seeing anything that falls outside of that. We keep a full assessment history of everything that we do, whether that's continuous compliance, whether that's manually run, or whether that's essentially when we draw dashboards. Obviously, there are some queries that go on in the background to do those as well. In terms of continuous compliance, really simple to set up. You create a notification policy within Dome9. So a lot of this is fairly straightforward stuff. You can include the alert in the alert console, which is up here. You can email a schedule report. So I have one that runs at 9 o'clock every day to give me a baseline of my environment. You can send a separate message for each finding, which is useful when you want to when you have a ticketing system that accepts emails to raise tickets. You can have one email per one issue rather than one email with 50 issues in it, which is obviously bad IT service management. We can hook into HTTP endpoints, which is a new feature, and we can also push into GCP Security Command Center and AWS Security Hub with the Azure Security Center to come. We also integrate with ticketing systems, ServiceNow, Jira, and PagerDuty. The ServiceNow integration is currently being rewritten, and we'll be aiming for certification by ServiceNow, hopefully within Q3 of this year. Because ServiceNow is a very, very popular choice with existing customers. And then the policies is really just a way of tying the rule set that you've got against the notification that you've got. When you tie the two together, that's when continuous compliance runs. So once every hour, these checks will run and notifications will trigger based on how you have them configured. So it's really, really, really straightforward. From a network security standpoint, I mentioned the ability to look at pictorially what your network environment looks like. So what we do is we essentially suck in the security group settings, and you can see here this is an AWS environment. You can see that the peering links between each of these VPCs. It can look quite intimidating the first time you see it, but it's really simple to very quickly kind of drill in here and see actually graphically what's going on within this environment. So what we do is we automatically assign these to what are called swim lanes. So from the left to the right, this is essentially the level of exposure to the public internet. These are all obviously hard-coded addresses that we've put in there in the security group, a lot of /32s. What you can do is, if you've got a lot of /32s in there that kind of represent branch office, you know, or Soho gateways, you can actually add in a manual entry here to call it something meaningful to you rather than just an IP address. Every time you click on one of these objects, you'll see that this contextual information changes here on the right-hand side. And all we collect in Dome9 actually is metadata. So it's important to point out that we never look inside connected volumes, we never look inside databases or storage accounts or buckets or anything like that. So there should never be any concern about any PII being leaked out of Dome9. All we collect are things like access control lists, tags, rules, things like AMI IDs, regions, all that sort of thing. So taken on its own without any context, probably not a lot of use to people. What you can do with Clarity, though, is you can look at things like traffic flows. So if you need to do a bit of troubleshooting, a service has become unreachable, or it's reachable and it shouldn't be, that kind of thing, you can perform click-throughs on these, and you can see which way the traffic is going based on how you configured the security group. What you can also do is use a feature called Tamper Protection. What this allows you to do in Azure and AWS is to say, okay, now that I've got a particular security group, what I want to do is, sorry, let me just sort this by platform. What I want to do is lock this out to change. So you see here we've got some symbols that are green and some that are grey. The ones that are green have got Tamper Protection enabled, the ones that are grey don't. And you can configure these on a security group by security group basis. So test and dev, you're probably a bit more liberal about. Obviously production, you're not. But if you come and jump into one of these security groups, we pull in the settings from Azure, you know, who that's associated to, and the Tamper Protection is literally just a toggle switch, so we can turn it off and on as we see fit. We can edit from in here as well, so we can add a new rule, say here, and a lot of it is fairly standard stuff, so you know, which service type, name and description, priority, and the source type as well. So we can do management, full management of security groups from in here. And what Tamper Protection does is, if someone goes into the web console or uses PowerShell or CLI or an SDK to make a call into that environment and say, right, I want to add in any rule, for example, Dome9 will spot that, will raise an alert, and will roll that change back to your preferred state. So again, it's all about kind of identifying doors and windows in your cloud environment that are open, fractionally even, but then closing them as soon as you see them. That's probably all I need to mention for now. Logic, as I mentioned, let's get rid of that, is the new module that we brought into Dome9 a couple of weeks ago. At the moment, this is AWS only module. We are expecting support for Azure the second half of this year, hopefully Q3, but we'll see how we go with that. And what it does is it sucks in CloudTrail and VPC flow logs and allows you to run GSL queries against that content. So as well as just looking at security groups and things like that, there's some stuff in the cloud that we can't necessarily see. So what we do is we use the cloud-based tools that are already there. We bring in these logs, we essentially clean them and make them much more presentable, much easier to read, much easier to query, because a lot of these logs are really just massive tech files that you drop into an S3 bucket, for example. And to look at them in their raw form, actually, it's very, very difficult to get any sort of very quick intelligence out of that. So what we do is we give you a whole bunch of pre-built queries, again, which use GSL, and you see how simple these actually are. You can write your own custom queries as well if you want to. So just to give you a couple of quick examples, select an existing query. So Lambda traffic's a good one. Lambda functions live and die within a fraction of a second usually. Sometimes maybe a little bit longer than that, but generally they're very sort of ephemeral things, that they don't live a long time. They're very hard to track, very hard to kind of see the sorts of things that they're doing. So what we do is we can see lambda traffic within VPC flow logs, and we can represent that in a much better view in logic. So it's quite similar to Clarity that you'll have seen before. This is quite a simple example. We know this is a malicious IP address because we've got the threat cloud feeds that we bring in, but also some third-party feeds as well. And again, it's all about drilling into the important things. So as we click on this malicious object, you see that we're pushing this other one into the background. We don't care about that for now. We want to look at this. So we see the traffic's coming from the Lambda to this malicious IP address. So this is actually instigating that traffic, which, your first reaction would be, actually, I don't like the sound of that. But you see here, this is what makes it malicious. It's a command and control server. It's running TrickBot. This is all information that we've got, that we've extracted from within our threat cloud. And we can then dive into the logs to actually see, what's going on within that particular transaction, dates and times, and the usual sorts of stuff that you get in log files. But this is not inherently native to AWS. This is the real value add that logic gives you some idea of what's going on in that world. So if I just quickly change that view. And this will just render it in a much nicer way. So you're looking at the column descriptions, you can kind of see what's going on, destination addresses and regions and things like that. And as we click on individual transactions in this log file, you'll see some additional information that we've brought in via logic. So you see here, a lot of this is fairly standard log stuff that might seem quite dull. But one of the things we can do is, if you come in here, for example, and we look at this transaction, just by clicking on that, we're adding a lot of additional information that you wouldn't get otherwise. So this in particular is going to China, which usually raises a pretty big red flag, if you'll forgive the pun. If I click on this globe icon, it hooks into IP info, and it tells me where this is coming from. So if I don't have any customers in China, I might want to put in some geolocation restrictions or something like that, maybe through a WAF or through a CloudGuard IaaS gateway. Also, if I jump back into the threat hunting screen and I look at things like malicious accepted traffic, this also runs with continuous compliance. So you don't have to keep coming in here and remembering to check. If you set continuous compliance, it's, as soon as we see a Lambda function send into a malicious host, we want to do something about that. So we can raise an alert or a ticket or whatever. This is a very similar thing. So when you look at this map, some of these maps can be quite complex, and there's lots of interactions and complexities to it. But you can very quickly, filter out the stuff that you don't care about, as I said, look at the information about the individual objects, the direction of traffic flow, etc., etc. The rule sets and the policies work in pretty much the same way. So you can write your own. You can't run logic rule sets manually at the moment, but you can run them through continuous compliance. That's handled in exactly the same way as we did with continuous compliance for compliance and governance. So nothing different in that particular case. The final thing to look at is IAM safety. IAM safety at the moment is an AWS only feature. This is largely because you've got in Azure AD, you've got privileged identity management, which accomplishes a fairly similar thing. But we are getting a number of customers asking for Azure support, so that is something that we have on the roadmap, but it's more kind of a medium-term goal at the moment. But IAM safety fills a gap in the AWS infrastructure, in that if you want to escalate someone, you've kind of got to do it manually, and it's a bit clunky. So what we do is we can bring in IAM users and roles, and we can do elevation. So for example, if I decide to elevate someone, I can come in here and go into IAM users, pick someone, demo admin for example, and then I can elevate for a particular period of time, and I can also change the protection on it as well. So essentially what this is for is, like I say, it's a time-boxed elevation of permissions. Generally speaking, you don't want full administrators to be a full admin all of the time. They should have sort of a BAU list of roles that they've got attached to them. But then things like terminating instances, deleting keys, deleting Route 53 zones, that sort of thing, stuff that could be really destructive in the wrong hands. or even if someone just makes a mistake. You know, you want to be able to put in some guardrails around that. So what this does is temporarily escalates them for an hour, 30 minutes, however long you want. When that time box finishes, that token is revoked, and then even within the same console session, they'll lose those permissions straight away. So it's a really good way of managing them, but also things like contractors who may be in for a week to perform tasks on a particular AWS account for a project, for example. So that's a really quick sort of run through of the Dome9 console. You know, I realise I've kind of packed a lot into a very short space of time, and we can spend a lot longer than that going into those individual areas. But hopefully it's giving you a good sense of the sorts of things that we can do with Dome9, typical use cases, not just about guarding against external threats, but also, you know, people just making mistakes internally, misconfiguration, maybe not understanding what a service does, that sort of thing. So putting in those guardrails to let people work, don't hold them back, but you know, don't let them potentially take your business down for a period of time or leak data, etc. So to very quickly summarize, CloudGuard Dome9 supports all three main public cloud environments, AWS, GCP, and Azure. CloudGuard Dome9 Tamper Protection provides those guardrails against misconfiguration and malicious actions, which, you know, IAM Safety does a very similar thing. And CloudGuard Dome9 is an integral part of the Infinity Total Protection suite. If you're not aware of that, Infinity Total Protection is essentially all of our security products in one bundle that you pay subscription for per user. So if you're looking at various components of the CloudGuard suite, it may turn out to be more cost effective to look at Infinity rather than buying things piecemeal. But that's just to give you some information on that. And at that point, that's everything I have. So back to you, Shona.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much for your presentation. It was clear and concise and to time, which is amazing. Just want to invite the audience to type any questions that they may have regarding any of the concepts introduced or any of the products demonstrated, anything else that we potentially haven't covered that they'd be interested in and would like to see. If you'd like to just take a couple of minutes to just pop into questions bit or chat and do pop a quick question out to Chris, I will pose them to him over the next few minutes. Otherwise, I'd just like to thank Chris for his time. Thanks for the demonstration as well. Thank everyone else for taking the time to come along today. I appreciate, given people's very busy diaries, it's not always the easiest to attend these sessions live. So, really do appreciate the time that you've taken this morning. And then lastly as well, just with in terms of the recording as well, we have recorded today's session, so we will be making sure that we make that available to you and your to pass on to your team later. So I do have a question for you from the audience. So in terms of tamper protection, Chris, how frequently does the tamper protection run? Meaning, what is the total time the change could be in place?
It's usually about a maximum of 5 minutes. So there's like a 5-minute loop that we're constantly reviewing all these different security groups. So any change that we make into a security group goes in instantly, but to actually do the tamper protection check is a maximum of 5 minutes. Usually it's less than that. It's kind of 2 or 3 minutes, but just as a worst case scenario, you're looking at 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that answered the question as well. Any other questions from the audience? Please do pop them across. That would be great. So once again, just to thank everyone for their time. If you're interested in the slide deck that Chris has provided as well, obviously you can reach out to me and I'll send them across as well. And last request from me is just to take 2 seconds at the end to fill in the feedback survey. That would be absolutely fantastic. So I don't have any further questions, so I'm just going to wrap up. And thanks everyone for joining us this morning. And thank you very much to Chris for his presentation. Thanks everyone.